Okay, Bryce, can you tell us about your flight out of Rangoon with the intelligence officer typesetting?
Yeah, well, anyway, you know, I was looking for a load to take back, and I picked up about a ton of mail, and that was on the aircraft when this chap came along and said, you're going back to Calcutta? I said, well, back port, handy. He said, well, I've got some typesetters I want to get for the intelligence people back there. So anyway, I said, well, how many have you got? He said, 40. I said, well, I've got a ton of freight on now, and I don't think weight would permit that. Well, he said they're all pretty small, you know, they're all come out of Cambodia and Indochina and things like that. He said, I don't think any of them weigh more than 80 pounds. He said, I said, have they got any gear? Well, he said there wouldn't be 20 pounds amongst a lot of them. But, and he said, I really need to get them back there. I said, okay. So anyway, there was a hell of a storm on at the time, and so I got to the end of the runway, and I said to my navigator, this is going to be a bit sticky. But Doug King was the coolest guy in the world. I said, now what I want you to do is I want you to practice getting 15 degrees of flap. In case we're not airborne by the end of the runway, that'll jack us into the air if I'm over 90 miles an hour. And then I want you to get the wheels up right away, and we'll make it, I think. So anyway, so we practiced, and Doug was a Canadian farm boy and just cooler than anything. So anyway, we're hurtling down the runway, and I said 15 flap, and he put it on, jacked us up, and we never saw anything else from then on because we were on instruments right off the deck. And so that was kind of interesting. Another time, I'd heard that Melvin Hornby from my home village was flying photo reconnaissance Spitfires out of Burma, and so I'd been looking for him. So one day we were at this airfield, I've forgotten the name of Fawsey or Hawsey or something. Anyway, there were 2 PRU Spits and a tent nearby. So anyway, I had to get rid of my load before I could go and look for Hornby. So anyway, we just got the load off, and a hell of a storm came through, and I had got the control locks in on my Dakota, and my navigator and I, to reinforce things, were hanging on to controls, and we had the tail into the wind so that it was, you know, reasonably safe for the aircraft. But there were some American Wacko gliders that were on the opposite side of the airstrip, and this storm just picked them up and threw them on their backs into the jungle. So it was pretty impressive. Anyway, then a torrential rain, and it was a dirt strip, so I thought, God, I've got to get out of here. So as soon as we could, we left. So I didn't get to check on the Spitfire. A year later, in university in Saskatoon, I met Mav Hornby, and I was telling him about this, and he said to me, "You dumb." So he said, if you'd looked over at that tent, I was trying to keep the thing from blowing away. Now, this is from a village of 250 people. When I was sweating out getting to be a W01, because by W02, W1 had been in the green sheets, you know, the what they call them, temporary records or something. I thought, well, eventually I'm going to get this W1, and because it was 3 or 4 months overdue. So I was in Bangalore in a military outfitter shop, looking over them in the, you know, in the counter, and somebody darkened the door, and here's Tom Wiltshire from my hometown. And Tom had just come out of the jungle. He'd been a liaison officer with Wingate's 2nd Expedition. They dropped him behind the lines, and they fought their way out, and he was the link for that column with the people outside. Imagine, village of 250 people, 3 of us, we all wind up out in Burma.
Did you ever bring back any souvenirs? or anything as mementos?
This, and I had the wing off a zero, or the door off the radio compartment off a zero. I don't know whatever happened to it.
Can you just hold that up, what you're referring to?
Yeah.
And
Well, this was a hat that we were impressed with what the Aussies had, and so we got them too. And so I thought, gosh, I'm going to bring one of these home. And there it is. And it'll wind up in here, I suspect, because I wear it on Remembrance Day. Because so many people don't even know there was war on out there. And at least I get to advertise a little bit.
And that, you've hit on one of our questions was, it's usually noted as the Forgotten War.
Yes.
And in fact, that's the name of it. A lot of times it's the
Yes.
Forgotten War. And so, what are you involved, so it isn't, I know you're involved, can you explain what Burma Star is and how you're
Well,
involved?
Burma Star was this ribbon is the Burma Star. And so our vets of service in Burma belong to the Burma Star Association, and I'm the local vice president. We've only got 6 of us left here, and we meet every last Tuesday of every month for lunch with wives and widows. I think there are more widows than serving guys.
The Italian campaign was also considered a forgotten war, but in recent years they've had more commemorations. I wonder, has that happened with the Burma campaign as well?
Oh, much more so. There were over 1 million troops with the best general of World War II, in my view.
Yes.
Uncle Bill.
General Slim, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, that, do you think there is an awareness out there, or do you think there needs to be more done, or?
Well, I think there needs to be more awareness because what do you do? I think these days kids are more aware of World War II than they were, say, 30 years ago. I find when talking to kids that there's greater awareness. And the ceremony they have here on Armistice Day, where they have children coming up and placing wreaths that they've made themselves, I think it's wonderful.
So was there anything, any other topics that you wanted to comment on? I can think of.
I don't think so. So there's a funny little things that happened here and there. But
did you have any comments on say the leadership at either their squadron level or even overall of the leadership out in the Burma theater? That
I don't know. It seems to me it was pretty good. Sort of on the side, I'm really not too involved in the really sharp end, and I didn't complete a full tour either.
Hmm.
But because we could only count our operational time after we crossed the 90th, I think it was, going into Burma, and so the first and last hours of our trips weren't considered, operational or anything like that, which was reasonable.
So what happens, or where are you on VJ? Do you remember VJ Day or
VJ
VE?
Day, I was on my way home. I was sailing up the Suez Canal, and I had managed to go on the boat with a couple of bottles of scotch, and my navigator, and another guy, and 2 guys and I. We were probably the only 4 people on the boat who were a bit inebriated. And it was really funny because it was a boat under military command, and apparently we were told afterwards was that the chap in charge of the troops had heard about these 4 guys who were in pretty good shape, and he had, every time he was somewhere, we had just left it. and we were sailing up the Suez Canal, and of course, there was a little thing of interest that always happened when ships sailed up the canal, because they would be greeted by Egyptians who seemed to like to demonstrate how far they could pee in the direction of the boat as you went by.
When you, were you part of the group that would have been the Canadians that were sent back a bit early?
Well, yes, because we were all supposed to be going to the Pacific. And so the war, I was away from, I forget what day I got on the ship, but it was about 10 days later that the war ended. And we were on our way home to join the Pacific Force.
Did you remember, did you have to sign something at that stage to join the Pacific Force?
No, I don't think so. My brother, who was in the Army, he did. And, but I just understood that we were all just being called back to go to the Pacific. Because but there were Canadians who stayed on a little longer, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
Not much. Not like a lot of the RAF troops, because the unit that I had been running moved to Rangoon a week or so after I left it. So I missed out on that, and they did a lot of flying into Indonesia and places like that.
So later, I also wanted to ask you, so what do you do when the war ends? And I know you do one flight on a peacekeeping mission, but it's into Suez, so could you describe that?
That was in '56.
Okay.
And, well, after the war, I had done my grade 12 by correspondence. And so I didn't have the university entrance, so I went to cram school, which was called CVTS. Yeah. And they were all over the country for vets. And they gave us a chance to upgrade, get university entrance. And then I went to the University of Saskatchewan. Got married 2 weeks before I started to a gal who'd graduated the year before. And picked up a degree in psychology, and just at graduation time, the head of the psych department, who worked for the Defense Research Board in the summer, said, look, I've been asked to look for a couple of graduates in psychology to do personnel selection in the Air Force. Are you interested? Well, I've been tentatively accepted at UBC to do a master's in social work. And I thought, well, so anyway, went home, told my wife about it, and she'd looked at the back of my head for 3 years, and she said, let's go back, let's go in the Air Force. So that's what we did. That was kind of interesting. I was living in the barracks out in Saskatoon, and the university had taken over part of it. And this we could stay there while I was going to cram school to get my grade 12. And so there was a university dance one night, and to which I went, and I was standing minding my own business when a gal came across the floor and said, hey, this is ladies' choice. So anyway, one thing led to another, and 61 years later, I lost her. And throughout that time, a couple of times, if I was sort of fallen from favor a little bit and was reminded of it, I would say, well, just remember, honey, I have a self-inflicted wound. So, anyway, Merle was a wonderful gal. We had 61 good years.
Wow, that's great. Could you describe your flight to me, or do you remember on the one where you do fly into Suez?
Yes, well, in '56, I had just joined, when I went back into service, I went to do personnel selection. I did that for 4 years at Aylmer, Ontario, and then Saint-Jean, Quebec. And then I went to the comm flight in Winnipeg, flew search and rescue for 3 years, and then to Namao to 435 Squadron. And I forget, we got there October, November, something. Anyway, when the Suez crisis came on, our two squadrons were sent to Italy. And we had far more airplanes than we needed, but it was a good training exercise anyway. And so we had a load of stuff for you know, the UN people in the canal zone. We left from Capodichino and just outside of Naples in Italy, landed at Crete. Got served by that, forgot the name. Anyway, and then down into forgot the name of the airstrip in, you know, in the canal zone. And dropped our load off, and there were 4 airplanes that day, and the chap I was flying with had just checked out on jets, on T-birds. And inasmuch as we didn't have a load to fly back to Italy with, he said, let's see how high this airplane will go and see what we can do. And so there was no air traffic control there, so we separated ourselves. The first airplane went off, 15 minutes a second, 15 minutes later, third, and then fourth. That was us. And I was never so impressed with navigation because we got up to 26,000 feet. We passed the other 3 aircraft, but we saw each one of them. They weren't a mile off the track we were on. And we got to Italy, and air traffic control had gone on strike. So down over the boot, we went from 26,000 feet down to about 14,000. Arrived over Naples at 14,000 feet. There was a guy in the tower, and we requested landing instructions, or a landing clearance. And we went from 14,000 feet to on the ground in 4.5 minutes, which is a bit unusual for an unpressurized aircraft. But that act saved my bacon some years later, well, not long later, when I went into Cambridge Bay in the Arctic one night with blowing snow at 800 feet, and I missed on 5 approaches and was heading back to Yellowknife when I looked over my shoulder, and there was the airfield. And I put my wheels and flaps down, closed the throttle, stuffed it into full flying pitch, and got down on the runway in that little break that sometimes comes in storms. And when I rolled the end of the runway, my port engine was dead. So it would have been a long trip back on one engine to Yellowknife.
Can I just clarify, so and what aircraft were you flying in
The
the
C-119.
C-119?
Yeah.
And what, do you remember?
Flying boxcar.
Do you remember what cargo you had?
Depended on how far we had to go. You know, how much fuel we had to have on.
Sure. Yeah, that's for. It probably was just some UN equipment of something for in that one. That was the flight, the Italy flight, Italy to
yes,
Suez.
yes, it was UN supported stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, we're just going to kind of close this right now, so we want to thank you on behalf of the military museums, and actually even part of the University of Calgary, because
Yes.
this goes into the archives, and they're
Yeah.
connected, so all their students would have access to this if they wanted it.
Mhm.
And yeah, we just really appreciate your time. It's been an excellent interview. Your anecdotes have added to the factual types of things,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a great resource for Canadians and everybody here. So
Well,
thank you so much, Bryce.
It's fun.
Thank you.